Let's start off as we speak and people keep walking in, and because for all those who are here on time, I wouldn't really be wanting them to wait. For everyone who is here, I welcome all of you. A few rules of the game before I introduce the speaker today. First of all, kindly mute your mics once you join in. If you have already joined, that will help us understand the speaker better. So for all of us who are here, and obviously we have a few participants who have joined in already, kindly mute your mics as we continue this discussion. Overall, I would say that we have a decent group here. I would introduce once again Captain Amit Singh. He has been there, done that in aviation with about 14,000 hours, give or take a few, on both Airbus and Boeing as we speak. Presently, he's working with an airline in the Middle East. He's been there on the risk management and safety side of aviation, starting from Air India to Indigo Air and a few others. He's been instrumental in generating papers across the globe. He's presented documents related to the subject matter today, which is cognitive lockup. I'll be coming back to this in a little while. Erroneous performance calculations, inattentional blindness during
I think we lost the host.
Yeah, pardon me for the glitch. The small matters do come up, but rest assured, let's come back. Inattentional blindness during visual approach and social conformance and its effects in aviation. He's a member of the Royal Aeronautical Society. He once again presents the gray side of things, not the black and white as we speak, the mind over matter sort of aspects which relate to, once again, the most crucial aspects that come into play. The subject matter, as you can see on your screens as well, cognitive lockup as we speak, relates to approaches, unstable approaches very specifically. There are a lot of other domains that come into play, a lot of other factors that result in an unstable approach. And rest assured, cognitive lockup is one of the most crucial. With this, I will hand the
And I'll take over from here.
Yes, Amit, I will hand you over the whole thing. I'm off.
Thank you, Fahad. Thank you, Felix Aviation and Fahad. Fahad is a motivational speaker and a very gracious host, and it is his initiative, and he has been after me. And so here I am. Thank you very much again, Fahad. The topic for today is cognitive lockup. And I see a number of participants here who are aviators, pilots, and some may be non-pilots amongst the aviation group. So for the ease of understanding of everybody, I'll try to manage the presentation going back and forth. And firstly, I'd like to welcome everybody. I hope everybody is safe and keeping well, keeping indoors. As you know, aviation has to deal with risks. It is always a balance between the output and safety. So any of these two becomes overbearing, it has a consequence on the either production or the safety side. Now, there's a lot of talk about engineering aspects in safety. We have engineering controls, we have newer aircrafts, new technology, and new barriers in aviation, which enhance safety. But ultimately, it is till date the human who is the master. And when the human is the master, the brain is at the controls. We would like to say brain is at the control, but There's another thing called mind, which physically does not exist. So these two play a very important role in every incident, accident that we have seen. So leaving the technical aspects aside, let's see what this cognitive lockup is about and what is the role during the final approach and especially unstable approaches. In this presentation, I'll go through cognition, what is cognitive lockup, the definition, the various phases of flight, the factors which affect cognitive lockup. There'll be a small video clip, and just as a reminder, you might have to adjust the volumes of your headset earphones, might just come into loud. Two studies which have been done on cognitive lockup and conclusion. So cognition, as we all know, is a combination of perception, thinking, learning, and memory. Perception can be different, depends on the person who's looking at the image or visualizing. If you see the left image in black and white, it can be perceived as a granny and old woman, and as a young lady too, looking the other way. It is a feather in the cap. So it is how you look at it, how you perceive through your senses. Thinking is how much time you ponder. Humans tend to think most of the time. The real decision making and brain work is very less because we have a lot of set rules called heuristics. We apply these set rules on the situations. Learning is a continuous process, and we learn from everywhere. I have learned, in fact, from the very junior co-pilots who have questioned me on the basics. That got me to thinking that back to the basics is a must nowadays. Memory, we have working memory and long-term memory. How do we process and pull out things from the memory? And it is good for situational awareness so that we know our environment, where we are, where we want to go. So putting all these together, cognition is basically helping us in making a good decision, informed decision. Now, where does this switch come from? Every day we have multiple tasks. So we do not multitask, but we prioritize tasks. So that is a misnomer that we multitask. And when we are doing a task, we cannot simultaneously concentrate on two tasks. We prioritize one over the other. Now, cognitive lockup, as you see in the middle, there's the lock. The significance is that we are at times unable to switch over from one task to another. If we are almost nearing completion one task and another task comes up, even though that is of high priority, but the brain is unable to switch for a number of reasons, which we'll discuss very soon. Keeping it very simple, day-to-day example, you can imagine yourself watching television, sitting on your couch, you're watching a game or a show, nearing the end, and somebody comes in, your mother, wife, or girlfriend, honey, need to wash the dishes. And you give a weird look. You're unable to comprehend why. So in simple terms, you're unable to switch tasks because you are at a very crucial juncture. Even though the other thing may be important, but you are unable to switch tasks. That is the cognitive lockup, simplistic put. Definition-wise, it's the same. It may occur in situations in which a person's attention is captured by one task so that another task with even higher priority is disregarded. Now we see the different phases of flight and the percentage of accidents, incidents, fatalities which have occurred. We are basically looking at the approach side, wherein the maximum fatalities and accidents happen in the final approach phase. And initial approach phase, as you can see, 13%, fatalities 18, final approach 14 and 9% and 22 in landing. As compared to takeoff and cruise phase, these are very little. And why are they bunched up here is one of the reasons is the maximum configuration changes. You're configuring the aircraft, landing gear, flaps for an approach and landing. Communication increases, stress increases, intra-cockpit communication increases. So all the processes tend to bunch up together in the approach. That is where a high level of cognition is required, and the risk level is also higher. This is a Boeing presentation data which shows us how the causes of accidents are bunched up. We have unstable approach at the beginning, so we could be high on speed, airspeed or vertical speed, improper trajectory. Coming down, we could have sudden tailwinds, increasing our rate of descent or speed. We could end up high on the threshold, late landing, or high on speed, or a combination of two. After touchdown, we could have technical issues, reversers, spoilers, and runway friction. So this could lead to an excursion. As for Boeing, at the 1,000 feet, which is normally which every airline keeps as the gate for stabilization, wherein you should be configured or checklist complete. Most of the accidents do not happen because of that. Accidents happen later on down the runway. So 68% may be stabilized at the 1,000 feet gate, but something happens below which the pilot or the crew is not unable to control, and that ends up in an overrun. Now, the factors affecting cognition lockup, first and foremost, is a very interesting one. It is, as you read, it is called the sunken cost fallacy. So if you invest too much of time in something, you want to reap the rewards. People who have invested in share market would know that how much to stay on with the share before exiting. Do you want to cut down your losses and exit, or do you want to stay on, make more losses? So it always hurts to let go, but it is better to let go and bear more losses. Otherwise, in aviation concept, it is better to go around, switch tasks, and come back, try another approach, a better approach. Second is the task allocated. Now, everybody is driven by the policy. You have company policy, SOPs, so you have certain tasks allocated. You are obligated to complete the tasks. A lot of tasks are not given in black and white, but you assume that you have to do it. Morally, you have to do it, or you're obliged to do it, or for the sake of passengers or the company. So task puts some sort of pressure on you. These are all subconscious. They're not active, very passive, but become active at a very later stage. Next, we have, everybody's got these fancy gadgets nowadays, measuring the blood pressure and the pulse, oxygen. So it is time and task pressure. So as the time required is less, available to you is less, the pressure starts increasing. Once you are closer to the runway, and if you are required to switch a task, it is difficult for you to do so because of cognitive lockup. And last is the risk analysis and risk benefit. If you look at the final approach phase, what comes to your mind at 1,000 feet? How do you decide whether you're stabilized or not? You look at the parameters. So there are certain given parameters, could be 7, 8, 9. So speed, rate of descent, your trajectory, so tank angle. So it is not a clear answer for a go or no go. This is called in the risk terms, it's called risk proxies. So as compared to a TCAS event wherein you get a green and a red, or a ground proximity event where you get a red, wind shear red, that is a clear go, no go. But in an unstable approach, you are supposed to derive your current situation based on a number of parameters: speed, vertical speed, the bank angle, etc. So it is not a direct reading. So here the cognitive aspect increases. So if you are high on speed and you're pelting down, unable to control, and now you're told to think, what is your distance, what is your height? So that the brain is unable to do. That leads to a lock. So these are the four aspects: sunken cost fallacy, task completion, time and task pressure, and risk perception. The cognitive task demands, this is a table, simplistic table. On the top, we have the task performance period, which is divided into short, less than 5 minutes, medium, 5 to 20, and long, more than 20. The left, we have the three factors: time occupied, information processing, and task switching. So if you look at the first one, wherein all three are low, there is no issue because you can switch tasks, there is no pressure on you. The moment one becomes high, then your vigilance needs to increase. And the third, when two factors or more become high, that is when cognitive lockup sets in. So this is what you need to take care in training as well as in your situational awareness, that you don't bunch up things together, that it is difficult to manage. You have to space out things. That is one of the prime reasons why you have a number of incidents, including the takeoff incidents, like wrong runway, taking off from the taxiway, entering without permission, runway incursion, because we tend to bunch up things towards the last, a lot of actions together, communication. So that is where when we miss out things. So we are overloading basically. In the three-dimensional, we have the underload at the bottom when everything is low, overload at the top when everything is high, and then we move from left to right, from vigilance to a cognitive lockup. This is Eastern Airlines 401 accident in Everglades, Lockheed, 1972. Everybody would have seen it. Short clip. Please adjust your volumes, and it is about a minute or so.
See if you can put that light out. No, you got to push the switch just a little bit further forward. Now turn it to the right a little bit. No, I don't think it's going to fit. Hey, get down there and see if that damn nose wheel's down.
Okay. You got a handkerchief or something so I can get a little better grip on this? Anything I can do with? This damn thing just won't come out, Doug. If I had a pair of pliers, I could cushion it with that.
Everyone is absorbed by the crisis, so they don't hear the audio alert announcing a change in altitude.
The pliers.
The hell with this. Go down and see if that red line is lined up down there. Don't screw around with that 20-cent piece of light equipment. Eastern 401, I'll go out west just a little further if we can.
So this is when things go wrong and ends up here. So when you are too occupied in doing something, and at least one person should be paying attention to who's flying the aircraft and the trajectory. One of the studies which was conducted on cognitive lockup, this one, the equipment is an Airbus 320 simulator, 2 experienced pilots flying. And the scenario is that nearing the destination, close to the top of descent, there is a lot of weather. You need to circumnavigate. The weather is moving towards the destination. So both the pilots are busy discussing in good CRM concepts, the threat error management, way to deviate, how much you deviate, what if the weather moves towards the destination, what if the visibility drops, what is the alternate, different strategies. So they continue further down. And at this stage, the instructor from behind introduces an engine failure during descent. So thrust is idle, engine failure is introduced. So engine failure takes place and no one notices it. After some time, they notice it, but they still continue with the circumnavigation. Once they are on track, clear of weather, they come back to the malfunction, deal with the malfunction. So what we see here is at some stage, there was a cognitive lockup wherein they gave priority to maneuvering the aircraft over the engine failure. So if you look at the graph, at 0 and 1, the system malfunction was introduced at 1 minute. X-axis is the time, Y is the executed goal. Then they go back watching the storm. They deal with the storm. And then next, what we see is they come back, handle the engine failure. Once everything is done, then they go back again to watching the storm. So this period from 0 to 3, or rather 1 to 3 is a cognitive lockup, wherein they were aware of a system malfunction, but they were unable to do it, unable to allocate the resources or attention towards the malfunction. Another study, study 2, is again very interesting. It is on another simulator, a 350 generic simulator, while it was being built. So it had the displays of a 350, a lot of system of a 380. And here they try to find out, does cognitive lockup depend on the situation they are in, or it depends on the person, experience level, or both? To do this experiment, conduct this experiment, they had a scenario wherein the flight crew were conducting or flying a star for runway 14. Now, at some stage, the autopilots failed, autopilot 1 and 2. Later on, there was a change of runway. And now you need to revise the FMS, rebrief, everything, and carry out the approach. So that was a control situation. Now in the experiment, the same failures happened, 2 autopilots and change of runway, but at a later stage, closer to the runway. So let's see how did it go. So we have the star coming from the north, and before the waypoint T-Nox is a control. Scenario 0 is a control situation, ideal situation wherein you have the second autopilot failure and a runway change later on. In the experiment, the red one, scenario 1, the autopilot fails, and after sonom, we have a scenario 1 change of runway. From runway 14, which was initially planned, the aircraft was cleared for runway 28. So how would the crew respond to it? This is a German experiment, and professional pilots were used for it of varied experience. Out of the total crew, 1 experiment was eliminated because they did not follow the path, any path. The rest 4 were eliminated because of data issues. So they still had 15 crew sets left, based on which this whole experiment was conducted. Now, after scenario 1, the aircraft flies down to runway 28. So next, we want to see and judge how did cognitive lockup play up in this. Was there or not? So the result was, or the discussion conclusion was, that the crew in scenario 1 who were closer to the runway when the runway change happened deviated from the track, prescribed track or the star, because they were manually flying, as compared to the control experiment. If you see on the top left, the blue is a control experiment and red is the scenario 1 where there is a change. Now the difference is, what we can see is a deviation from the track. So that is on account of cognitive lockout, wherein the pilots are unable to switch or pay as much attention to the higher priority. So a deviation from your intended track can have consequences. So the pilots need to be aware of it. First thing is awareness, and second thing, when you're two crew, one person has to know where the aircraft is flying. That is the basic. Now, in conclusion, I can safely say that pilots, when approaching the destination, have invested a lot of time in the task. So typically, when you have invested more than 80% of your time, that is when cognitive lockout is more likely to happen, which is the case when you're on a final approach. On the final approach, if the runway is straight ahead, you are more likely to land than initiate a go round. It all depends on the training and the habit formation. Risk analysis point of view, of course, at 1,000 feet, if you're an IMC, you are basing your decision is based basically on the numbers on the dials you see or the instrument display. From there, you have to infer the state of the aircraft. Is it undesirable state, or we are safe to continue? If not, we have to switch tasks. If we come under the pressure, time pressure, task pressure, and it could be a back of your mind about you're thinking about the passengers, the fuel. So all these will tend to put pressure on you, and which will lead to a cognitive lockout. Pilots will continue with the first task, that of landing at the destination despite being unstable as the approach, or when performing a long landing. A go-round can be conducted any time of the approach, even after touchdown, so long your reverser is not deployed. Now, what prevents the pilot from going around is the cognitive lockout, as far as the non-technical part is concerned. There's a lot of hesitation. Even if you are floating, there's a hesitation. This has been seen in other fields. I can give an example of the ships. You have a ship deck. An experiment was conducted on the ship deck, wherein there was a small fire on the ship deck and a big fire in the engine room. So the crew were busy in the first event of extinguishing the small fire in the deck, and the engine fire in the engine room, which would have crippled the ship. So that was done later when this was first one was extinguished. Another experiment, non-aviation, deals with another fire extinguishing scenario. You have two fires, but both the fires require different agents to extinguish. So if you don't have time pressure, then you extinguish one fire and go to another fire by switching the extinguisher. But if you're under time pressure, there is all likelihood that you will try to extinguish the other fire with the same fire extinguisher. So this is also a part of cognitive lockout. Carrying out a go-round is a task switching, and a lot of people consider it as a negative connotation. So what would the company think? What would the peers think? Things like that. So that also puts pressure on you. Training a habit formation, first and foremost, and whenever you are in the red zone wherein you're not able to think, you should be able to call out, or the other person assisting you should be able to determine that you are locked out physically from your physiological aspects, your breathing, your retina scanning, how you're behaving, are you frozen? So these are things wherein the training can intervene and help, where a lot of areas like the pilot monitoring role is important. Pilot monitoring, there's a BA study, the French investigator study, which shows the pilot monitoring in a high stress situation of a go around, they're not able to focus where to look. So they have to give critical call outs. So they're not able to focus where to look. So that comes from regular training and disciplined use of task sharing. That is my conclusion. And again, I'll leave you with another short clip. I hope it plays well. It is an interesting one. Well, thank you very much for listening in. I have a paper written on cognitive lockup. If you search it, my blog is mindfly.blog. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Over to Fahad.
So very kind, Amit. It's always a pleasure to have a word with you. And once again, with all the expertise that you carry and the experience that you have, I believe that's a lot of value. I have already mentioned, if you have a question, you can put it on the question or the chat box at the base of the screen. We already have one question as we speak. So I'll just quickly push that across to Amit as well. Amit, if you can hear me, and this comes from Susinder. He is very specifically said, and the question goes, how is a cognitive lockup different from selective attention? The video clip, the previous one, reminds me of the famous invisible dancing gorilla experiment in the midst of the basketball players. Is it not a similar phenomenon?
What you're talking about, the gorilla experiment, is inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness is that you are not able to see the obvious when your attention is focused on something. Whereas cognitive lockup is you're not able to switch tasks from one to another. So inattentional blindness, an example is the Air Canada 751 overflight of the taxiway in San Francisco, wherein they were focusing so hard on trying to figure out where the runway was. They lined up on the taxiway. And other factors, confirmation bias also played, but their main focus was on the runway, where to touch down, that they did not see the big 747s and 777s, almost 1,000 people. They came down to 60 feet. So that is attention focus or inattentional blindness. Switching tasks is cognitive lockup, where you are unable to do it. If you play sports, you would, if you play cricket, you're told not to fish outside, go for the ball, going outside, leaving the stumps. But when your concentration breaks, you do go. So if you're doing, if you're into sports, you do shooting, it's something called a trigger lock, wherein your brain says something that it's time to press the trigger, the mind says no. So there is a lock there. So the brain is not able to switch tasks. So I hope I'm able to explain that.
Yeah, I believe we have decently differentiated between the two aspects of selective attention and switch tasking or cognitive lockup separation. The next question comes from Captain Abdul Rahman. He says, or question goes, what is the best method to mitigate cognitive lockup? Is it training?
There is no one method, because training is very important, the most important thing, but discipline. So if you are disciplined and backed up with good training, then it is a sure shot method that you will not end up in cognitive lockup. Every time we see that we are pushed into an approach, we are pushed for takeoff, so we bunch up things together. Or we try to do a very fine decelerated approach where we say that we will take the flaps, configure later the flaps and gears. So we're trying to bunch up things at the last minute. So you should know that if you are high, and if you are high on altitude, high on speed, then it is better to plan early, to space things apart. So that is the most important way of preventing any incident, be it takeoff, landing, or in flight. Spacing out things.
It is one habit pattern, two prioritization of checklist or aspects what need to be done at a specific point on the approach. Next question, Mr. Sujit. Thank you for the compliments, Sujit. The question goes, does historical data show a definitive link between fatigue and cognitive lockup?
Well, yes, fatigue also plays a part because ultimately it is the brain which has to process. So your starting point is low. So if you're fresh, then you're able to counter. So as I gave an example that if you're in cruise and something happens, you have all the time. And even if you are fatigued, the likelihood of recovering is higher. But when you're on approach and you're fatigued, the likelihood comes down. So the probability of recovering comes down, basically affected by fatigue. Because from the situational awareness point of view, you're unable to comprehend. You see, the main important part at the 1,000-feet gate is when you decipher the numbers and you say that I'm unstable, you cannot see the consequences of being unstable. So when you see a red lamp in front of you, you can identify it with danger. But when you see the different numbers moving, the speed, rate of descent, and you say I'm unstable, what comes to your mind? The picture of the image of an aircraft which is overrun, that doesn't come to your mind. So that correlation is not there of the risk. So that is why we always correlate with images and colors better than figures. So that is the issue with the cognition part. We are cognitive misers basically. So that is the problem there.
Good enough. Good enough. Thank you once again. Varun, thank you for the addition. You've put in our CRM PowerPoint PPT in the chat or download to everyone. It's available. Thank you. Captain Arnab Das has a question. How do we train our mind to avoid lockup?
Well, training your mind is basically the first thing you do is breathe. So if you have breathing control, that is also scientifically proven in startle and surprise. So normally we do not breathe properly. We have very short breath. And to deviate, breathing is good for COVID also, recovery from COVID. So if you do take long breaths, so that basically unlocks your diaphragm. So in a state of startle, your body freezes. Why does it freeze? Because the diaphragm freezes. The diaphragm freezes, it prevents you from breathing. So you have to relax and breathe. So that is one way of becoming mindful. So that concept of being mindful, mindfulness and attention, all are related, and the core of it is breathing. So starting with breathing, you do meditation, you do yoga, whatever, the core is breathing. So any activity, so your actions, if you are talking to somebody, there was an incident in El Al and Air France. I'll take Air France. 777 took off with 100 tons error. They calculated speeds for 100 tons less because an input error. So El Al 40 tons, input error. Why? Because we were distracted. Why are we distracted? Because there are too many things happening in our life. Too many interjections, the dispatcher coming in, RT call, briefing, crew. But to get your focus back, you have to breathe. The breathing gets you to focus on yourself, right? So when you're breathing consciously, you're focusing on yourself, then you see all the clutter removes. The clutter goes away and you're focusing on your task. So that is the core of it.
Yes, I would certainly say this, Amit, that we'll take this for our next subsequent session on this webinar series. How do we ensure mindfulness and be is it safe to say that pilot flying, given the task at hand, is more susceptible to cognitive lockup? Partly, does a good crew intervention model then the only solution for the pilot monitoring to effectively use to get the pilot flying to switch?
Well, action-wise, the pilot has to take the action, the pilot flying. But it's a very good question, and everybody should ask, when there are two people in the flight deck, why does this happen? So why do we end up in situations from where we are not able to recover? We have two people we have the autopilot, we have so many warnings. So you would see that in case of high stress situation, accidents have happened wherein the GPWS is blaring, other warnings are blaring, no action was taken. Why? Because everything becomes silent. The crew is unable to hear it. That is the physical part. The senses part. So I'll give you an example. If you're walking with your friend or your child, the child tells you, I want to solve this problem, 2 plus 2, say 4. Okay. So you still continue to walk at a fast pace. Now you get a difficult problem. 10 into 16, okay, 160. Even more difficult problem. So as the difficulty increases, you would notice the speed of your walking, the pace reduces. And it reduces to a point wherein you stand and start wondering, let me think about it. So why did you stop? You did not stop consciously. But the brain diverts your attention towards a topic and it shuts down other areas so that you can focus on that. All the attention is diverted to that. So that is happening subconsciously. You're not aware of it. So when you're under pressure, the brain is shutting down other regions so that you can focus on something. So when you are too much focused, then you are unable to switch tasks because you're not able to comprehend the risks associated with it. Pilot flying, as I again said, is supported by the pilot monitoring. But if you see your books, if you ask the OEM, where is the pilot monitoring supposed to look? What parameters, specific parameters is supposed to call for a takeoff, for an approach, for a go-round? Basic few are given. But when you carry out a go-round, both the crew, they're frozen. Or when even the pilot monitoring, he sees that you're in a difficult situation, very tight situation, then his attention starts narrowing down. Again, all his other cognitive functions are shutting down. So he becomes speech recessive. He's not unable to call out. So these are the cognitive areas wherein you have to space yourself. The pilot monitoring has to give you an advance warning before you end up in a situation wherein both are, in a deficit of cognition.
Right. Perfect. Once again, thanks for the answer. I believe this thing also relates to a book written by Tony Kern by the name of Redefining Airmanship as well as Flight Discipline. It also speaks a lot on these two aspects of pilot flying and pilot monitoring. And his opinion, pilot monitoring is more important. But your point of view is also correct that there is no specific job guide or a checklist where it mentions where would be the pilot monitoring looking at critical phases of flight once we're closer to the ground, either on takeoff, dirty configuration, or landings. Thanks a lot for that.
If I may say so,
yeah, please.
I'd like to add something. If you see the pilot monitoring role defined in the books, it is a very strange thing that a pilot flying is supposed to be the more experienced person,
right?
High number of hours, more responsibility, and he has SOP task sharing defined, supposed to do a particular task on approach. But the pilot monitoring is given even bigger responsibility, which means he's supposed to monitor his instruments, the secondary instruments, and he's supposed to monitor the pilot flying also. So his physiology also he's supposed to monitor, and what's inside his head also he's supposed to monitor. So expecting that from a junior person or a non-experienced person is asking for too much.
Agreed.
So it is very generic that you monitor your instruments, you monitor others' instruments, other person's mind. So that is a difficult task in hand.
Point taken. Okay, next question from Mr. Masood. It comes, and the question is, greater the cognitive intelligence, lesser the chances of cognitive lockup. If true, how quickly to build cognitive intelligence in aviators?
Greater the cognitive intelligence, as in comprises of, as I said in the beginning, cognition is your risk perception, how you perceive risk. So that depends from individual to individual. So, and how much is your exposure? So that we see in startle effect. If you get startled by a sudden noise or a gong or a bell, if you're exposed to it, then the startle effect reduces.
Right.
So if a gun goes off, so you will be startled. But if you ask a military person, will he be startled? No, because he's used to it. So that is cognition therapy. CBT, cognition behavior therapy. You are slowly introduced to the thing that you fear the most. So slowly you become more comfortable to it. So your perception is the thing which is totally specific to you. Other thing is the learning aspect, your knowledge level, because short-term memory and long-term memory. If you're in cruise, something happens, you can pull it out from your long-term memory. But if you're in final approach, if a failure happens, then you have no time. You have to pull it out from your working memory. So how fast is your working memory in pulling it out from the long-term memory? It all depends at your knowledge level, your currency, how comfortable you are. So there are a number of factors. So it is not just one factor. So that is why we have recurrent trainings every 6 months or periodically, so that it stays in our working memory. The memory items we revive so that it stays in our working memory and it can be pulled out quicker. So that helps in a quick changeover. So we see we have the memory items, say a GPWS. So the moment we see that red pull-up toga, we take our actions. But unstable approach is a working, is a go-around, is a normal SOP, which is supposed to be memorized. But there we need higher cognition because we have to interpret. So as we saw in the presentation, when your requirement time is less and requirement increases, then we tend to go towards vigilance and cognitive lockup and further overload.
Perfect. Good enough. Once again, Varun, thank you for the image that you sent across on task prioritization, probably. That is what is available on the chat box again. Coming from Aman Bangia, the question goes, how does effective flight path monitoring tie up with cognitive lockup?
Flight path monitoring is again basically planning. So you should know where you are and where you want to be and at what state you want to be. So as I said before, if you have everything spaced out, nothing bunched up, so then cognitive lockup is not going to happen because everything is in low. The three parameters are in low. So there is no problem and no cognitive lockup. The moment we start deviating from the path, which means now we have to keep a track on our lateral and vertical parameter, then other dimensions, speed. So, and if we switch off autopilot as we saw in the experiment, so we are all trying to build pressure on the cognition level. At a stage wherein it will lead to a lock or an overload. A number of accidents have happened because of that. So you lose your sense of awareness, situational awareness. But effective flight path monitoring again is the key, so that you can plan your flight, your descent path, or your profile, and then there is no pressure on you.
Perfect. Okay, next question comes from Gaurav Pathak. The question is on the A320 example, the switching between engine and weather. Would that be
I lost you out on the last part.
I'll rephrase the question. It comes from Gaurav Pathak, and the question is, on the A320 example, the switching between engine and weather, would that be task prioritization versus cognitive lockup?
That is because the first task they had in hand. So what you have in hand is the first task, which was dealing with the weather. Secondary was not secondary. Second was basically the engine failure, which was a higher priority. But even though they saw it, they did not take any action. So they were in a state of cognitive block for the 3 minutes they were in.
Perfect.
They want to finish off with the first task, which is in hand, rather than what requires more priority. This comes to something called, also related is Zeigarnik effect. Now, Zeigarnik was a psychologist who observed that in a restaurant, when you go, you have the waiters taking orders, and they memorize the orders, and at the end of it, they presented the bill. You pay the bill and go. So what used to happen and what he observed is, so long you haven't paid the bill, they had the entire order in the memory. Imagine they were serving so many people, they had the entire order in the memory. The moment you paid the bill and closed it, it was forgotten. So there is a tendency in humans, in the brain, that unfinished tasks are not forgotten. They keep lingering in your brain and coming back again and again. That is a Zeigarnik effect. So this is also something which is unfinished troubles you. So you want to get it over with, even though the other thing is more important.
Right. We're coming to 5 minutes to closure, and we would like to take in a few points of view of people who have come across. Once again, let's start off from Javier, Cecilia. Thank you once again. Happy landing. Stay safe. You as well. Captain Arnab Das, will there be a replay of this session available? Yes, this will be available on the Phoenix Aviation Safety YouTube page, as well as the LinkedIn hyperlink as well. So you can pick it up from there. Other than that, who else do we have here? We have a few follow-ups as well. We would certainly like to push this follow-up question to the website or the LinkedIn page, where this one specific hyperlink will be available. And obviously, discussion is key, where we want to learn the maximum. And that is where, or disagreement is where maximum learning takes place. So once again, Captain Abdul Rahman, thank you for the question. I'll push this onto the website as well. We have Antonio Diaz. He specifically says, great input towards risk perception. Anticipation is key in order to mitigate the threats that would lead to cognitive lockup. I completely agree, and I believe we've talked at length on both. Before we culminate, I would just like to say that it is once again an honor and a privilege to host Captain Amit. We would certainly like to take this into the subsequent webinars as well. For example, the most important is risk perception or risk analysis vis-a-vis cognitive lockup. Where do we take this aspect? Because as we all know, we can mitigate risks to the maximum possible, but never zero them, as we say. But rest assured, this is where we would be going in the next few weeks as we flow through. Mindfulness is another aspect that I would love to speak on with Captain Amit. And once again, everyone who is here, I believe, who are also very much interested in how do we enable breathing control to ensure that we have maximum performance enhancement in human beings, especially in case of both the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring. But once again, thank you for everyone who is here. We have had a total of about 45 odd participants, grand total coming and going. I understand difference in timings makes it a long way to go. I would certainly bring in Glenn Jones, a CEO of Phoenix Aviation Safety Australia, to come in and say a few words to Captain Amit, as well as for the people who have generated value by asking valid questions. Over to you, Glenn.
Thanks, Fahad, and thank you very much, Captain Amit, for delivering this session this evening, my time. It's about 5 hours earlier where you are. Fantastic session, and it certainly explains some of the things I've come across during my career as a pilot. sometimes I haven't quite been to the stage of cognitive lockup, but I was certainly fixated on a few things, and it does come with experience. I think when you get to the point where you can actually allocate your resources, your mental resources, a lot better to cope with the problem. Thanks to Fahad for running the session tonight. And also, last but not least, thanks very much for the participants that have joined us. It doesn't happen without your attendance. Please keep an eye on the Phoenix Aviation Safety LinkedIn site, the website as well, and as Fahad has corrected me, the recordings will be on the YouTube site. I'd forgotten we'd done that, but thanks again, everybody. A very worthwhile session. I'll be staying on for a second or so too. Thanks again.
Thank you, Glenn.
Once again, culminations, and thank you once again, Captain Amit, for your time. For everyone else, stay safe, stay home. That's the only way we enable ourselves to move out of this pandemic situation. But rest assured, risk management remains primary. I sign off by saying, hasta la vista. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.